What if I told you that one of England's greatest football prodigies was mocked by the media before he even hit his prime? That despite shocking the Premier League at just 16, breaking records left and right, the headlines weren't about his talent, but his weight, drinking, and off-the-pitch scandals. And yet, what happened next shut everyone up. Because this so-called overweight teenager didn't just survive, he dominated. He tore apart the best defenders in the world, forced legends to take a step back in disbelief, and ultimately became the most expensive wonder kid of all time. But before he could reach the top, he had to survive a media storm, career-threatening injuries, and an unexpected betrayal. And here's the kicker. There was one single moment that nearly destroyed his career before it even started. We'll get to that in a minute. But first, let's talk about how a 16-year-old boy shook the football world and had even Thierry Henry speechless. At just 16 years old, Wayne Rooney was already a nightmare for defenders. In his first Premier League season, he came face-to-face with Arsenal's Invincibles, a team that hadn't lost a single match in 30 games. And standing across from him was Thierry Henry, a man who had heard the rumors about the kid who scored 114 goals in 29 games at Everton's youth academy. But here's the thing. When Henry finally saw Rooney up close, he couldn't believe it. Because this wasn't a scrawny teenager. Rooney looked like a fully grown man at just 16. And then it happened. With the game tied and Everton desperate for a hero, Rooney made a decision. If I get a chance, I'm shooting. I'm shooting from anywhere. Fans were convinced. They thought this kid was the chosen one, the man who would bring back their glory days. But what happened next? It wasn't a fairy tale. Because despite his unbelievable rise, Rooney's world was about to be ripped apart. The media would tear into him. His personal life would become a circus. And before he even turned 18, he would make the most controversial decision of his career. We'll get to that in a second. But first, let's talk about the moment Rooney went from wonder kid to the most expensive teenager in football history. Rooney had done the impossible. He broke Arsenal's streak, became the Premier League's youngest ever goalscorer, and had the entire country talking about him. Everton fans believed he was the chosen one, but the rest of England, they weren't convinced yet. So what did Rooney do? He doubled down. At just 17 years old, he was already outscoring legends like Shearer, Bergkamp, and Owen. Everton had gone from mid-table nobodies to Champions League contenders, all because of this one kid. By January, Everton panicked. They knew big clubs were watching. So they made him one of the highest-paid teenagers in the world, offering a 400% salary increase. And just when people thought the hype was over, Rooney went even bigger. He became the youngest player to ever represent England. And then, the Euros happened. The headlines should have been about his talent, but instead, the media was obsessed with something else. His weight. Some tabloids even called him fat. Yes, seriously. But what Rooney did next? It silenced every single critic. Because at just 18 years old, he single-handedly tore apart one of the best defenders of all time. He scored twice against Switzerland to become the youngest goalscorer in tournament history, then ran through Croatia, scoring from outside the box like it was a training drill. Suddenly, the media flipped. Now, Rooney wasn't just the best teenager in England, he was being called the next Pele. He was the missing piece of England's golden generation. But just when it seemed like his rise was unstoppable, disaster struck. Because in the knockout rounds, Rooney broke his foot. And while England collapsed, Rooney sat in a hospital bed, watching his team get eliminated. But here's where things get crazy. Even with a broken foot, Rooney was named in the team of the tournament, one goal away from winning the Golden Boot, and suddenly, he was the most valuable teenager on the planet. And that's when the real chaos started. Because the moment his price tag doubled overnight, the media went from hyping him up to trying to tear him down. And trust me, what happened next? It nearly ruined his entire career before it even started. We'll get to that in a second. But first, let's talk about the transfer war that made Rooney the most expensive teenager in football history. Rooney was the hottest talent in football, but the media, they wanted blood. They dug up everything, his nightlife, his drinking, even false accusations. But none of it mattered, because behind the scenes, the biggest clubs in the world were fighting for him. Real Madrid wanted him. Newcastle bid for him. Sir Alex Ferguson, he wasn't losing this one. And then, it happened. In 2004, Manchester United broke the transfer record, making Rooney the most expensive teenager in football history. 37 million euros. More than twice what they paid for Ronaldo. The pressure was insane. If he failed, he'd be the biggest flop in history. So what did Rooney do? On his Champions League debut, he dropped a hat-trick and an assist. At 18 years old, he was unstoppable. But the real test? It was still coming. because the world thought he and Ronaldo were the future of football. And then, everything fell apart. Because Rooney and Ronaldo, they became enemies. We'll get to that next, but first, let's talk about the moment Rooney's career nearly collapsed. Rooney and Ronaldo, the future of football. Until one moment changed everything. World Cup 2006. Rooney gets sent off. Ronaldo, his winking at the bench. Betrayal. Back at Manchester United, the media wanted war. Fans hated Ronaldo. Rooney, he was spiraling, drinking, isolating, 10 games without a goal. But then, he snapped out of it. Hat-trick versus Bolton. 23 goals. United win the league. Rooney and Ronaldo, back as the deadliest duo in football. But next season, Ronaldo took over. Ballon d'Or, Champions League. Rooney, injured, watching from the bench. It crushed him. But his biggest fight? It was still ahead. And this time, it wasn't against Ronaldo. We'll get to that next. But first, how alcohol and injuries nearly ruined his career. Rooney's body was breaking down. Injuries, alcohol, the media relentless. Then, Ronaldo left. It was Rooney's team now. The critics? Too slow, too unfit. His response? 34 goals. United's best player. But then, disaster. Champions League semi-final injury. United lose the title. Next season, World Cup disaster. Scandals. Transfer request. Manchester City wanted him. Ferguson stopped it. And just when it seemed over, Rooney did the impossible. Bicycle kick versus City. Title-winning goals. Club legend. He wasn't finished yet. But his prime? It was slipping away. And what happened next sealed his fate forever. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, and bell icon.